What did medieval travelers eat along the road? You start the day with a mouth the size of a small church, and provisions the size of a confession. The road is patient about this. It has seen better breakfast plans. Your pack gives up its inventory with the solemnity of a ledger. Heel of bread wrapped in a once clean cloth, a thumb of pale cheese, 3 wrinkled plums that have been to more villages than you have, and a strip of salted fish pretending to be a philosophy. You cut the bread with a knife that knows both wood and stubborn crust. Breathe the barn-like scent of it, and let the first bite soften against your teeth. The world is quiet enough to hear bracken tick and a starling rehearse, and your hunger becomes manageable, not a drum, but a slow timbre. You walk and you chew as if these are the same skill. The bread is heavy enough to vote, the cheese crumbles like a kindly argument, and the plums apologize for being themselves with a sticky sweetness that clings to your fingertips. The salted fish is the loudest guest at the table, briny and bossy, and you take only a sliver, promising yourself you'll be grateful for the rest later when the sun is past patient. The first joke of the morning happens in your head. This is a tasting menu, you tell yourself chef's choice, and your belly files a complaint with the Guild of Bellies. You propose arbitration via a sip from your leather flask. Thin ale, small beer, the color of late straw, and the taste of safety. The road is damp from a night that had opinions, and your shoes learn every cold puddle by name. By mid-morning the track widens to a proper road with ditches, and luxury of luxuries, a milestone that has remembered itself. You share the last bite of cheese with a curious crow, who looks like a priest distrusting your theology. The hedges flex their green elbows, scattering a few blackberries into easy reach. You harvest them carefully because roadside fruit has a sense of humor about thorns. You think of the rule you learned on your second journey after the first taught it too sharply. Never eat all of anything unless you can see the next thing. A handful of berries now is a story you get to finish later. Another traveler falls into step, not so close that anyone has to reassess their knife, not so far that your ears lose company. There's a belt spoon at his hip, its handle shaped like a rude fish. It flashes when the sun considers coming out. In another life you'd admire the spoon openly, and ask where he got it. But the etiquette of the road says admiration lives in the eyes and nowhere else. He whistles 2 bars of a tune, then stops as if he owes silence a tax. When you glance across he lifts his flask just enough to mean share. You nod. He sips your small beer and returns it without polishing the rim. In the same motion his palm opens a pinch of something brown gold wrapped in waxed linen. Mustard seeds ground with a little vinegar and salt, he murmurs. You touch a bit to what's left of the bread and it wakes like a sleepy cat, vivid and grateful. You promise yourself you will start carrying your own small twist of spice the way you carry a needle and thread. The road teaches Kit. You crest a hill and the world resets into a hamlet, a smear of thatch, hens practicing small bureaucracies, one cottage with smoke curling up like a soft sermon. The wind is safer here, and the path is stitched together by footprints that still remember their owners. Past the last hedge a strip of common land runs toward a stream, and on the bank stands a woman with a tray hung from a strap around her neck. Pears, wafers, a cone of salt as white as a minor miracle. She sells them without ever quite acknowledging coin, as anything but a polite fiction. You barter down 2 pears that think highly of their future, and a wafer stamped with a sprig of herb design so perfect you admire it before you give it to your mouth. The crunch is theatre. It leaves a lace of sweetness behind your teeth, and asks for nothing in return. By noon you have collected a picnic of road reason, half a pear, a wafer memory, bread made tender with sips of ale, and that stubborn fish being less stubborn each time you taste the sea in it. You sit on a boulder that has been a dining chair since the Romans had opinions, and you take inventory of yourself, ankles loyal, shoulders weary but not dramatic, thoughts simple, something like a plan for the afternoon. A cart creaks by with barrels that announce themselves through their smell, herring, onion. Something sour that will become something good when heat meets patience. The carter nods like you are 2 monks of different orders. Your belt spoon's absence feels like an opportunity, not a lack. You tell yourself that before the week ends you'll find one a little less fish-shaped, but just rude enough to make you smile. Mainstream historical fact slides in as naturally as the road beneath your feet. For many travelers across medieval Europe, the day's drink isn't water but weak ale, small beer, safer in most towns than raw rivers, thanks to boiling and fermentation. It's calories you can swallow and a mild courage that neither sings nor quarrels. Quirky tidbit nudges your sleeve. Some folks tuck a tiny twist of spice, ground mustard, or a sweet powder like poudre douce, if they're fancy, into a waxed bit of cloth, a portable sprinkle that makes a crust friendlier and a stew less anonymous. Historians still argue whether ale was always safer than water, or just safer in crowded places, and whether the average person sipped it because it was wise, or simply because it was there. You swallow and decide. The road's answer is always both. The afternoon stretches like dough. Now the land offers its own little groceries. Fat leaves of sorrel bright as a grin, nettles eyeing you with the kind of love that stings, a few mushrooms so proud of their caps. You reconsider your relationship with identification. You pick only what you can name twice, in daylight and in a dream. A woman at a gate sells you a crust from yesterday's bake, half price, twice the charm, and points you toward a green lane where a willow leans over a ford. There'll be a boy with a pot, she says, a sentence that sounds like prophecy, until you find him and the pot turns out to be peas bobbing in something that was water and is now soup. You pay 1 coin and a grateful look, and receive 3 ladlefuls into your own little cup, each skim of the surface bringing up a pea that wants to be a pearl. You eat it with the humility of a person who knows where they are, and what they've chosen. Gates announce themselves by habit. Dogs bark in the tense present, geese in the future conditional, and a bell speaks in the mood called town. You arrive to hear market voices fading, the rhythm of a place exhaling the day. The alehouse door sits as open as law allows, and inside is the kind of light that makes everyone better looking. You think of the title this road has given the place in your head, Stew and Steadiness. If your purse were heavier, you'd sit and order a trencher, one of those sturdy plates of yesterday's bread soaked with whatever was patient in the pot. But you choose the traveller's economy, a seat near the hearth, and a cup of small beer, letting the smell of onions and thyme feed you with a memory you get to share. The publican does not judge the arithmetic of your coins. She has seen every math a body can do. She slips you a sliver of turnip cooked until it confesses, for the road, she says, and winks in a dialect of kindness. On your bench someone hums a tune that reminds you of cold mornings and good dogs. A peddler opens a pack that seems to contain more things than logic permits. Ribbons that have met no breeze yet, pins with little hearts pressed into their heads, a block of gingerbread, carved with squares like a chessboard. You look with your eyes, your purse says behave. He breaks the gingerbread along its lines, and the air warms with spice and honey. You exchange 2 small coins you swore to save for a larger square you can make last an afternoon and a night. When you bite, you can feel the fairground built into the crumb, the drum and the laughter again. You wrap half in cloth, the other half becomes company. The road resumes, a polite recognition as you leave the comfort of walls. Dusk is polite about its arrival, then suddenly not. You walk past a field that still holds the day's heat, past a shrine with a candle that has accepted its fate, and into the part of evening where you begin repacking your hopes. If luck is generous, you'll find a loft and hay that doesn't scratch like a rumour. If luck is ordinary, you'll find a hedgerow that curves into a cradle, and a sky that is all kinds of yes. If luck is busy elsewhere, you'll find a ditch and make it hospitable by meaning it. Either way, the food you carry becomes more than calories. It's a plan you can hold. You settle where the land agrees to hold you. You stack your choices in order. Bread to be coaxed with ale, the last of the pair to be quiet with, a pinch of spice that turns tired into good enough. The gingerbread a promise for the last mouthful of awake. You let the night settle on your shoulders, and the sky press its cool palm to your forehead. Somewhere nearby, another traveller turns in their sleep and a horse considers the moon. You think lightly of the rules of this life, and how its menus are built. Whatever goes in your mouth today was carried by someone. A baker carried dough, a fisher carried net and salt, a brewer hoisted barrels, a peddler carried miles. You eat with thanks because you are what you carry, too. Next morning, the road starts earlier than you do, and forgives you for it. Your breakfast is neat and silent. A few sops of bread softened in ale, the salted fish now less argumentative, a new handful of hedgerow blackberries that stain your finger with a season. You touch ash to your face the way you saw an old carter do. It keeps the midges honest. A boy with a yoke of pitchers passes like a procession, calling water for the houses that pay. You consider asking but decide the river is quicker and the ale kinder. Your feet remember the first mile for you. You donate your mind to the next one. By late morning, the road delivers you to a wayside cross, and wonder of wonders, a tiny hospice kept by people who pronounce welcome as though it were a first name. Their yard smells like bread with a destiny. The sister in charge has the no-nonsense hands of a person who meets hunger the way a mill meets grain. You offer your name and your business, passing through honest miles, grateful for whatever rule allows, and she nods you to a bench with a bowl on it the size of your happiness. Pottage, a democratic stew of barley or oats, bits of root, a few leaves of something that argues for spring even out of season, and sometimes today, a small gift of bacon cut so thin it seems like memory. A chunk of bread goes with it, not today's, not offended about it, and a cup of something weak and cheerful. You eat as quietly as you can because there's a gratitude you don't want to injure with noise. This is a good moment for another truth tucked under the day. Many monasteries and religious houses keep the old rule of hospitality, shaped by the idea that every guest might be holy if you look with ajar eyes. Bread and pottage for the traveller at the gate, a bench to sit, sometimes straw to sleep, and always the insistence that you are not a burden while you are here. Quirky tidbit brushes your sleeve again. Pilgrims often pin little tin or lead badges to their hats, scallop shells for Compostela, little swords for St. Paul, vials for Beckett's blood, not only as souvenirs but as passports of a sort. A badge is a story someone can verify. Historians still argue whether medieval people did breakfast as a rule or saved their hunger for two bigger meals. The road, practical as ever, answers with whatever the hour allows, calling a mouthful of bread and ale by any name that gets it inside you. When you leave you carry more than you brought. A small heel of bread generously forgotten into your hand, a ladle of stew's memory warming your veins, and the soft authority of having been welcomed. The sister closes the gate, and the bell suggests that time exists. You walk light for a while, noticing how much of the day's taste you can still feel on your tongue. Onion, a whisper of pork, some herb, thyme-ish, or thyme's cousin, depending on what the garden believed this morning. Afternoon again means markets where there is a town, hedges where there isn't, and those interesting middle places, a cart parked under a tree becoming a shop by pure intention, a woman who sells little pies out of a cloth-lined basket, a boy who has learned to cut wedges from a big wheel of cheese without angering geometry. You buy a small pie because it's hot, and because the crust is thick enough to be both plate and promise. When you bite, steam tells you a slow story about leeks and pepper, and maybe a persuasive shred of leftover meat honored beyond its station. You hold the pie with both hands because good things ask you to be present. You remember the kind of traveler who will show you what they carry if you ask nicely. A sailor homebound with hardtack that could stop arrows, a wool man who snacks on hazelnuts with a professional caution for shell fragments, a student who keeps walnuts in his sleeve to think with, a mason who cracks a raw onion like an oath and eats it on bread with salt, face serene as a saint who has found his liturgy. The road teaches a particular liturgy of the hand to mouth. It is half hunger and half grace. Evening again, and you are a little richer in stories and poorer in coin. The exchange rate the world prefers. You have learned that every town has a smell that becomes a taste if you follow it. Byres, fish on Friday, pastry when someone has a wedding to justify butter. You have learned that not all ale is a friend. Some of it is gossip in a cup, and you drink water sometimes anyway from a spring that has chosen to be kind. You have learned that if you can't afford a bowl, sitting near a bowl, and being polite to someone who can is almost as filling as the thing itself. The night repays what it can. The next stretch of road is a Thursday, which matters because fasting days remember their own calendar even when you don't. The alehouse stew tastes of peas and patience, no meat in the pot except the memory you carry in your nose, and honestly you don't mind. Your spoon is borrowed, your posture slumped into comfort, and the bread you bought is cut into sops to soak so nothing is wasted except the idea of scarcity. A musician plays the same tune twice, and then decides not to. Someone tells an ordinary joke with the triumphant air of a person submitting proof to a guild. You admire the turnip again for being so industrious about turning into dinner. You find yourself composing a list in your head with all the kindness of a sleepy clerk. What gets you through? Bread, cheese, small beer, onions, peas, a friend who can cook, a handful of nuts, a sweet when the road goes dark in the mind, a fruit that wants you to believe in seasons. And what makes it better? Salt you can carry, a pinch of spice, a spoon of your own, a knife that refuses to be only a knife. You add luck, and not being proud to the bottom of the list, underline them twice, and fold it into your ribcage. Mainstream fact returns like a steady neighbor. The salted herring trade stitches coasts to inland tables so firmly that even people who have never seen the sea taste it. Barrels ride roads like traveling ponds. Meat and fish hide in pies not just because pastry is delicious, but because the crust is a container you can carry for a mile or a day, a plate that keeps the filling honest. Quirky tidbit, uncorks a memory. Gingerbread at fairs gets pressed into carved wooden molds, tiny saints or shields or little houses, then iced with a white so bright, you see it in dreams. Children keep the shapes long after the sugar has gone. Historians still argue whether trenchers in most places were more often hardy slices of old bread or wooden plates pretending to be bread, and whether the edible kind were usually eaten by guests, or dried for servants, or saved for the dog who understands feasting as well as any theologian. You think the road's reply is the same every time. It depends who's hungry and who is kind. Another day, another market strung along a street like beads. You let your eyes browse the stalls and your nose decide, ending up at a man who sells field pies. These are not pies that grow in fields, he informs everyone, but pies that remember fields. Leaks a few cubes of bacon if the day was friendly, chopped greens bound with egg on the days when eggs make sense, pepper as proof that trade exists. You buy a small one and waggle it once to let the steam leave decently. The crust is thick because it travelled here on the man's cart and intends to travel farther inside you. At the far end of the market, a brewer's boy dips cups from a barrel, and has learned to do it without spilling a saint's tear. A tinker shows you a tin whistle your fingers flirt with. An old soldier sells you a pouch of raisins for less than honesty and more than luck. He says they cure melancholy. You know they don't, not really, but they make a fine argument for it. You save half for the hour of the day when the road tries to sell you its hardest thoughts. All this eating is slow and intentional. The road discourages feasts made of hurry. You try to notice that after you feed yourself the world gets its color back in layers. A duck's head is greener than it was when you were merely hungry. The wood smoke tastes like history again, not just heat. Even the dust that loves your boots feels like a companion, not a complaint. When it rains, food becomes more than policy. It becomes shelter by a different name. You tuck yourself into the lee of a hedgerow, and build a small edible fort out of bread, onion and a coin's worth of cheese protected in cloth like a title deed. You whisper a joke, only your mouth hears. This is chef's seasonal platter, and the chef is named whatever was left. It works anyway. You sip ale, you kept capped against the weather, and it tastes warmer than it is because you need it to. The sky repents eventually, they always do. You learn too the art of asking. Not begging, which makes a song you can't afford to hum, but asking in a grammar of respect. Might I warm my hands by your kiln? Could I swap 2 berries for a pinch of salt? Would you like to trade half my onion for your old bread? Work appears when your question wears its best boots, carrying a sack from a cart into a storehouse, sweeping a threshold the way you were taught to. Sweep watching a child while a mother sells her baskets, holding a horse's bridle for a quarter of an hour longer than you planned because the owner's eyes said thank you before his voice learned how. Payment becomes a bowl without ceremony, or a pint without remark. You learn to accept it, the way you accept sunlight, with gratitude and no sudden movements. On a long day, when the road stretches like a tight string and the wind plays it without mercy, you tell yourself tonight you will eat like a tiny lord. By tiny lord you mean an apple roasted in ash at the edge of your fire, so the skin bursts and the inside turns to jam, a pinch of spice on your bread, a careful chip of cheese arranged like a metaphor, and your secret handful of raisins cast like stars on the apple once it stops burning. You plan this while your feet attend to miles, and the planning is a meal you eat in the present tense. You consider the different versions of you that the road has moderated, the you who arrived with coins and certainty and used the coins, the you who arrived with fewer coins and practiced the grammar of soup, the you who arrived with almost nothing and learned how to be fed without owning the table. You can't decide which version is most virtuous, so you award them all a nap and keep walking. The last stretch finds you again listening for the bell that means enough, whether it belongs to a town gate or a cow, or simply the clock in your chest that has counted past decent. You end the day under a tree you have decided to trust. Your spoon, which has become your friend, does the work of making the bread into a little boat to ferry stew from the bottom of the bowl you borrowed to the sensible harbour of your mouth. Your knife, which remains a plain-spoken tool, cuts the gingerbread into 2 more nights of sweetness. The sky is abundant with small reasons, you join them by default. When you finally lie back and watch the moon negotiate with a cloud, you realize how many kitchens you ate in today without owning any of them. A hedge, a market, a doorstep, a bench, a patch of common grass. 3 different rooms that smelled like onions in 3 different ways. Your table has been your lap, and also the earth. Your napkin your sleeve, your manners a vigilant kindness. The road asks you to be skilled in gratitude. Sometimes you are. There is just enough wakefulness left for one more set of gentle truths. Mainstream fact. Steady as ever, spice is not only a luxury in our centuries, even a pinch of pepper or a scrap of ginger can ride the road from a far-off port to your very mouth, tucked into a pie, or sprinkled into pottage, proof that ships exist and people are curious, and trade is a kind of hunger with sailcloth. Quirky tidbit, smiling. Some cooks color their sauces with the petals of calendula or saffron when it can be afforded, so that a stew looks sunlit even in winter. A traveler notices with the eyes before the tongue, and historians still argue whether markets in your century sold more ready-to-eat street food than we give them credit for, whether the common person snacked more than our tidy meal charts suggest, and whether the word snack is even fair in a world where a heel of bread is both lunch and plan. You hold all of that in your mouth as if it were gingerbread and decide the question is delicious, even unanswered. Sleep begins its slow pour into your limbs. You think about tomorrow and rename it breakfast. You promise yourself you will be braver with nettles, more generous with salt, kinder to your future self when you see apples for sale, and can choose one more. You imagine the alehouse you might reach by mid-morning, where the stew pretends to be the same every day and succeeds, and the bread is so sturdily cut you can set a spoon on it, and have the spoon rest as if it had found its own bed. You picture a monastic yard somewhere up the road where someone has mercy in the shape of ladles. You picture a hedge that says yes again, and you promise to carry your new spice twist as if it were a tiny pen you use to write flavor into days. You close your eyes and inventory your blessings like a clerk who makes neat columns: bread, cheese, onion, ale, roots and greens, a little pie, a pinch of pepper, a spoon, a knife, a good patch of earth, a sky not in a hurry, and miles that intend consistently quietly to become a story. The road as always wants to know if you're hungry. You answer with a contented sort of maybe, and fall asleep before the sentence reaches a period.